Welcome to Dynamos Dozen, the podcast that I bring you each and every single week, where I talk about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between, never forgetting the talc, including the mueslis, as I just said there.
The
Yes,
movies, yeah.
is correct. So the mueslis could be good. That would be watching movies while eating muesli. So it's a new word. You are very welcome to the show, exclusively brought to you by the Dynamo Podcast Network, your one-stop shop for absolutely everything from football to horror to pro wrestling to sports to combat to absolutely anything you can think of. We have got it. So please like, subscribe, smash the bell notification button, and be sure to comment and let us know your thoughts, both positive and negative, and everything in between. But today, I am joined, as always, as you can see, by my right-hand man for a very special episode. Every episode is special, but I think this one is pretty special because we are going to be talking about something a little bit different that we haven't done before, myself and Niall together. And we're going to be talking about someone in the world of combat sports that has transcended combat sports and literally made it into an absolute billion dollar business worldwide, not just boxing, but MMA, and pretty much anything that involves two people fighting is now big money business. And it is, of course, the one and only Ireland's own proper 12, Mr. Conor, the notorious McGregor. Niall, I reached out to you over the weekend, and I just kind of had a little bit of a brainwave because obviously UFC was on at the weekend and it was a pretty monumental card. And even when this man is away, he's still very relevant. This man does not ride off into the sunset and then he makes a surprise appearance at WrestleMania. No. That could still happen one day. I would bank on it. So you obviously running the fantastic WrestleMania in Dublin's Stephen's Green, by the way, your one-stop shop for all your Christmas needs. Get on to Niall, get onto the Facebook page, Wrestling Mania. And those of you who know.
Quickly. Time is running out for Christmas.
It's 10 days. It's 10 days till Christmas now. By the time this comes out, you've got 9. So... And I would take away 3 of them, so you got about 5, 6 maybe at most. But Niall, I thought you would be the perfect man to do maybe a little bit of a run through of his career and then talk about the impact that this man has had on both sports and entertainment. The highest grossing sports star of last year, I believe, as well. So I'll hand it over to you to kind of get your thoughts of where we should begin with this. I suppose we can probably go back to the start on this one. You know, a young fella who's on the dole, the DOLE, as we say over here, on the 188. Talk to me a little bit, because obviously you've met the man. He's obviously been in your shop early on. You know, and you've seen, I suppose, the rise of his fanfare grow from zero to absolute, into the stratosphere.
Yeah, it really is. We talk about like a rags to riches story. I mean, this is, sometimes guys put these stories out and, it's like as if they're kind of building a story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if there was ever a box office movie to be made on the career of someone, this is the legit. This is your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, your Hollywood, all wrapped up into one ball. This is a guy who redefined the definition of image rights without a shadow of a doubt. And he's a guy that appeals to so many people in terms of his way, in terms of he has molded people in terms of his look. He's changed and reinvented his look so many times, and a lot of people changed their look and they follow him. He was well followed, and he was, I've attended a couple of the earlier MMA events where he fought on them and stuff like that. And the following that he had, even from the early days, he's he's one of those guys that's very endearing to people, isn't he? He's like, you can't but not like a guy who rises up from where he was and gets to where he gets,
Yeah.
And pushes it even more and more and more and more. And his timing and his way and his, like, as you said, you could have a huge event on there at the weekend and it's still all about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he ain't even there. Like, this is a guy who's like, gets onto the Forbes list. You know what I mean? And he fights twice a year, maybe. He might even only fight once a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he just rocks up. But he really defined. I mean, when he turns around and he says that a lot of the fighters out there owe him big time, they really do owe him big time, because when you go back and you look at the money in the UFC prior to his rise, guys were getting paid. Now, the UFC obviously grew with him as well in terms of its financial
structure and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I mean, he was really the guy in there that really triggered it. I mean, obviously the Chuck Liddells and the Tito Ortizes and the Ken Shamrocks and the Brock Lesnar's and Alistair Overeem's, all these big MMA stars and stuff, they obviously got paid very well from the UFC. But this guy walked in and he just dictated the checks, really, didn't he? And he, from his very first fight in Sweden, where he fought Brimage.
Remember it well, yeah.
And I have to thank him for that one, because I had him for KO at about, I think he was 12-1 that day for the KO.
Yeah.
And his fight was on early as well, because you remember his fight was on the early card. And I remember sprinting down out of the shop to get the Paddy Powers off Grafton Street to throw 100 quid on him at 12-1. I got 1,300 quid back that day. And I just knew he was going to can him, you know what I mean? Because if you looked at his earlier fights, like his aggression and his way of fighting and all, and like, we talk about mixed martial arts and stuff like that, and we talk about, like, we have an understanding of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and that whole flavor of MMA, and like a guy choking a guy out is as impressive in the world of MMA as a knockout nearly. But it's KOs and TKOs that really put the bums in seats, isn't it? Like, when you think about it. And this guy,
100%.
And that's why this guy has such an appeal, because he goes in and he lays it on the line. And for about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years in there, like, he literally told you what he was going to do when he went in, and he did it. And
this is the world of Mystic Mac when it got to that stage. I mean, before, like, one of the things that impressed him about me was he was like Bruce Lee reincarnated for a while, because obviously that was his kind of his idol, I suppose, one of his idols growing up, along with Muhammad Ali. And he brought such a strange, and I don't think it's strange, but I mean, to a lot of the fighters that he was in with, it was strange, because he was bringing Bruce Lee highlight reels to life. He was doing all these strange kicks.
Yeah.
His movement just absolutely befuddled people. I think that's the best word to use. And his left hand, good Lord, that left straight. I mean, God bless anyone that's felt that power, because when it connects, it's pretty much game over or close to it. And he was bringing all these sort of amazing Taekwondo kicks in to just make guys go, what the fuck am I in with here? And he looked rangier than a lot of these guys that he was fighting in that division too, because he's 5'9", but he was fighting a lot of lads that may have been like 5'6", 5'7". But even lads who were matching him in height, he had such a great reach. And even beyond the reach, he knew how to extend his body and make it even longer. You know what I mean? Yeah. If that makes sense. Some of his kicks to the stomach and stuff, even that straight kick where he'd push up into the sternum, you were like, that's knocking the wind out of people. It was super impressive, man, when he rolled onto the scene, and like being one of our own as well. Like, how could you not get behind that?
Yeah, and it was a time in MMA as well, when you think about it, because MMA was on the rise at the time. The UFC was on a huge rise at the time, but they had lost a lot of key guys. Like Chuck had kind of finished. Tito had kind of finished, because Tito kind of was that first coming, wasn't he, to talk all this shit and generate this huge amount of money. And when you think about it, back in the day, when you had the Tito, Chuck, and the Ken Shamrock stuff and all that, Tito was like nearly the first McGregor if you like, in terms of he was demanding the money off Dana. It was pay me what you know I'm due. I know how much you're earning off these events, so I know what I'm worth and all this kind of thing. And Tito, the smack that he used to talk. And then Conor came along at a time when all that had gone away. And it was like a lot of the Brazilian fighters had come in, and no disrespect to them and stuff like that. They are amazing athletes and amazing fighters. But I don't think a lot of them got the whole idea that, like, you have to sell yourself now. It moved into an entertainment business.
Well, I think Brock Lesnar was the first huge star they brought in. And obviously they wanted to follow that up with Fedor. But Fedor Emelianenko was that kind of one that almost got away, you know, from Dana in the sense that he was the one that everyone wanted to see in there in his prime. But he was the kind of guy that didn't really need to sell a fight with his mouth because his reputation preceded him.
Yeah.
But you had guys, like you said, you had guys like the Arlovskis who were kind of attractive fighters in terms of people liked them. They got behind them, you know. But you're right. You mentioned Tito. I mean, Tito was just a less articulate version, if you want, because you know he's a bit of a. I wouldn't say this to his face, but a bit of a goon at times to certain fans. You know what I mean? I knew what he was trying to do. We did because his merch, you know, sold itself. But a lot of people didn't really like him, and I think once he went on that slope of getting hammered by the likes of Chuck and all, and then you know Randy Couture slapping his ass, he kind of lost his way a bit. But this lad doesn't lose even if he loses, right?
Yeah, well, you see, the fan base as well changed, because if you remember back then, the fan base was kind of quite tight. So it was generally, I think, people who were known around the Vegas area. It was generally people who were involved in fighting in the gyms. It was generally jiu-jitsu guys and wrestling guys and fighters and maybe ex-boxers and stuff like that. That was kind of the fan base at the time. But all of a sudden, Conor came along, and all of a sudden, your uncle was talking to you about MMA. You know, your mate on the street was talking to you about MMA who was never interested in fighting in his life. All of a sudden, all these pro wrestling fans all of a sudden had another out. And Lesnar obviously had moved over there, and Conor was coming along, and they were going, well, who's this new nature boy who's just rocked in the newer version and is basically has the suits and the look and the smack talk? For me, it was like the second coming of the Four Horsemen back in the Crocker promotions and stuff like that. And it was all about the money. It was all about the clobber. But this guy showed up and he did his job. You know what I mean? And
he knew how to mold himself. Like, as you say, you know that he, I mean, you know, if Conor, hopefully one day he'll see this, but like if he's watching this, he knows that we know that he definitely had an influence from these pro wrestling guys. You know what I mean? You see him walking down the hall in the, you know, no chance doing the Vinnie Mac strut, you know, the billionaire strut. And, you know, he took the Vinnie Mac strut and made it into his own. I'm sure Vinnie Mac was sitting there going, how do we get this guy? You know?
Well, see, from an early stage, he was very clued into the fact that he knew he had to bring in millions and millions and millions of a new fan base into this that weren't necessarily educated in the arts of the product, but wanted to listen to someone who wanted to talk smack and have a go and who they could get behind.
Yeah, 100%. Why don't we let's talk about some of your hours. I mean, you have a list there, but talk about some of your favorite fights of his early on, coming up, like when he started really making. I mean, obviously, he oh my God, he terrified poor Jose Aldo. Do you know what I mean? Like, he got so deep into that man's mind, and that was the first like big one. But I mean, there was a couple before that. But that was the first big one where he was coming out saying, we are going to go into the favelas and we're going to take over the fucking favelas.
And he did. This guy rocked in there, went into bars there, took pictures of Jose Aldo, played darts with them, ripped them up, ate the picture standing on a bar, all this. Like, he literally went in. And it was very strange as well, because the Aldo one is one that obviously sticks out for obvious reasons, because he literally did what he said he was going to do. You literally seen him hours beforehand in the locker room or in the house when they were doing the UFC, the countdown and stuff like that. And you could see him actually practicing exactly what he did. So he knew exactly what he was going to do. He had wound Jose up so much that Jose just came flying out at him, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. But it was the one for me that sticks out, and I know he's won all these titles and stuff like that. The Brimage one was a really important one. That was kind of his first one, really. His first one in terms of UFC, let's say. I mean, he had a bunch of fights prior to that where he was,
of course, yeah,
on guys for fun, basically on the European circuit, you know. But the Brimage one was one where, you know, he had this one opportunity. This was like as if like you'd been given the 6 numbers in the lotto and you had to memorize them and quickly write them back down again to win the lotto. And he knew what he had to do. He had to go in there. He had to make a statement. And you hear him at the end of it, 60 G's, Dana, and all that. And then after he's
60 G's, baby. Yeah.
And, you know, afterwards he was in the suit with the, you know, the cap and the dicky bow and the pocket watch. And he was talking to the lads, someone has to pay for this and all this. And this is right from the get-go. He probably hadn't got 10 euro in his back pocket at that stage. You know what I mean?
It was all like an investment, though.
But it was absolutely brilliant, you know. But the one that sticks out for me is the Brandao one, that UFC Dublin.
Oh yeah.
And not just for his fight, but there was a wave that night. The world stood up and took note of Irish MMA and Irish fighters. The card was stacked.
Dana in particular as well was like,
everyone performed. He had never experienced a crowd like that in terms of the boisterousness of it and the way they got behind him. And Conor went out and just obliterated this guy. And it was just, I can't imagine how he felt that night in the octagon. He had dragged the UFC out of Vegas all the way to Dublin to put on a card, and he had stacked it with most of his teammates as well. Yeah. Hats off to him on that as well. He brought his teammates.
And shout out to obviously Coach Kavanagh, John Kavanagh as well. I mean,
absolutely, he was being pivotal in his career.
And Roddy, obviously, as well. All the
absolutely
team.
Yeah.
SPG.
But yeah, that's one that sticks out for me. That UFC Dublin that night. You know, a legend was born, really. You know, I mean,
what about then following that up with the Poirier one? I mean, because that was obviously pre-Aldo, right?
Yeah.
And you know, people kept saying, he's fighting these lads, and you know, he's predicting them, but he's not fighting anyone. This is what the negative, you know, what the critics were saying. And he kept saying that, didn't he? He goes, they just keep doubting, and I'll just keep proving them wrong. And Poirier, another one where this is the mastery of the art. Do you know what I mean? In what he's basically telling you, I'm not just a joke. Like, I am a serious fighter. There might be kayfabe commentary in between, but I am a legit fighter. And good Lord, that Poirier fight, I went back and watched it again recently. It's like, wow, he really dominated.
Clipped him right on the temple, but this is one when you think about what happened then, you know, he was being like, we kicked off this tidal wave of Irish MMA and all these fighters coming through, and you know, he was the head of that. He was the figurehead of this. He was now everyone's guy. I mean, when he went to Vegas, it filled up with Irish people. I mean, we've heard the stories, people getting loans out of credit unions to go to Vegas to follow this guy. They were all in on him and stuff like that. And you can see it even at the events. You see in the Mandalay Bay and all, the escalators are just full of Irish with tricolors. It was unbelievable.
I believe he was the first as well to start properly selling out the weigh-ins.
Yeah. The weigh-ins were getting attendances that were nearly bigger than some of the previous big events. Yeah. And it was just, and of course, the way he did it as well, the weigh-ins nearly became a show in themselves. You know what I mean? Because the build up to it was unbelievable. And I just, you know, if you remember back the Dennis Seaver one as well, you know, and of course they were so clever as well because the wave of the Irish had happened. And I think, as far as I know, we fought Dennis Seaver was in the Boston Garden, wasn't it? Where that event happened. I think it was the Boston Garden. And I remember him just rocking up and going, you know, you're just, what did he call him? You're a little juiced up midget or something like that.
That's what it was.
Was giving him socks like, and he obliterated Seaver that night with body shots and everything and all. Seaver, like, and you could tell straight away, even when they walked out into the middle of the octagon, Seaver didn't fancy it at all.
And Seaver was a tough son of a bitch as well. You know what I mean? He was a tough son of a bitch, but Yeah, that was special as well.
Saver always reminded me of a smaller version of, the bad guy in Die Hard 2. They're the spit
Yes.
of each other. Spit of each
Yes.
other.
Yeah, same hair,
Yeah.
same, like
Yeah.
they look like they've been in wars.
Yeah. But he also, on this path as well, he created some of the greatest one-liners in combat sports as well.
Oh
And
my God.
and I just wonder, where that came from. I wonder, had he prepped it, or was he looking into it or trying to figure out how to do it? He hit so many out of the ballpark, it couldn't have been just on the fly.
Listen, like I say, he grew up idolizing the likes of The Rock and stuff like that. And you can be guaranteed he looked back on Ric Flair promos and stuff like that and thought, if I can modernize this, and like anyone that knows Irish people, we have a very quick wit anyway. We're very quick off the mark. And I think that's really what he done. He brought things like, who the fuck is that guy? Like that's something that
goes down in history. Goes down in history.
Do you know what I mean? But that's something that you'd hear in a bar that an lad would say. And he brought that. And that's not in no way, shape, or form is that to say, but it's that quick Irish wit that he was probably dealing with his mates. Do you know what I mean? On a regular basis. Like, who the fuck is that guy? Or, the best one, remember on that same, I mean, if you go back to that press conference and you look at Ronda Rousey, she's just literally above McGregor when he's saying all this smack talk.
She's cracking up.
She's cracking up. And then Donald Cerrone, Cowboy, comes in and goes, I'll kick the Lucky Charms out of your little Irish ass or something. And he just goes, yeehaw!
Yeah, he was having a go.
He was having a go at everyone. And you see Cerrone just going, like he's laughing himself. He's going, how the fuck do you actually come back on this guy? Yeah. He was just...
Yeah, a couple that stick out to me. One was, I think he was on the Late Late Show. He was on with Ryan Tubridy. And if you remember that one, Ryan Tubridy said to him, well, you've kind of made it now and you've earned all this money. How do you stay motivated? I think it was on that anyway. Might have been.
So.
And he turned around to Ryan Tubridy and he says, the only way I stay motivated is I keep on spending the money, so I have to keep on earning it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was brilliant as well. But he's just been. I remember that press conference as well with Chad Mendes, where he turned around and he says, you were going around saying that you're the Mike Tyson of this organization. He says, I got in the octagon with you and I obliterated you with body shots. He said, and all this, and it was just, it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, when he turned around and there was a BT Sport interview on that one, because obviously, and here's another very important thing, nobody in the history of the sport or any sport has done as much media coming up to fights as McGregor used to do. Yeah. He went coast to coast, town to town,
world tours,
village to village, all the while trying to, train for these fights and still coming out on top. Like, do not underestimate the work that man put in selling the fights and then staying in shape for it, having to cut down weight. I mean, we see the size of him now. I mean, imagine the struggle to cut down to that weight. Sometimes he looked gaunt in the weigh-ins, he was skin and bone in his face.
Yeah.
And then he came out looking better the next night. But one of my favorite lines in ever is when he was on BT Sport doing press, and Chad Mendes was on the he was on the video, the video telecast, and they're in the studio. And he goes, everybody you've come up against, you've never come up with a wrestler like me. I mean, what's someone like you going to do when I get you on the ground or when we wrestle? He goes, I'll rest me balls on your chin.
And it was just out of nowhere. And again, as you said, it's like as if you're in the bar with your mates just having a conversation. And it's just,
rest me balls on your chin. And literally I remember Mendes just going, I have to take that one.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't.
Yeah.
What do I say? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was crazy. And I remember the Holloway fight as well. He had a real good fight with Max Holloway. And I just remember the disappointment in people when he came out of it. And I think he had done the knee, which was going to keep him out for nearly the guts of a year. And he was just on this crest of a wave. The fanfare was behind him. The show was rolling into town. And all of a sudden, everyone was well, we've all arrived at this sport. We're all fans of this sport now, but 75% of that fan base were Conor McGregor fans. They weren't necessarily MMA fans. And now this
No.
guy's put on the shelf, for the guts of a year trying to recover.
Yeah,
and you were
of
there
course.
going, and everyone was kind of looking around and going, so what are we going to do now?
Yeah,
It was like
100%.
it's like they had lost their leader. I suppose then, from there on then, and I don't know whether it was, you get comfortable in the wealth, or you get distracted by the fame, and then it starts to kind of unravel slightly in terms of, you know what I mean, that the saying about sleeping in silk sheets and stuff like that from the boxing
that was,
world.
of course, that was the great Marvin Hagler that said it's hard to get motivated and wake up at 7 a.m. when you're sleeping in silk pajamas. But I think, to put a bit of context on that as well, while you're going there, like, the chap was he was touching into the hundreds of millions of here, and he was also taking on a lot more
other business.
Oh yeah, but he was taking on bigger, more ambitious fights. I mean, the first loss was obviously Nate Diaz, where he got choked out. But man, like, that was a barn burner. And one of the quotes that I love from McGregor is that, because I mean, it's horses for courses, but it's a million miles away, isn't it, when you look at his reaction to a loss versus, say, Ronda Rousey's reaction to a loss, and both are, I'm not judging her for that. That can happen to anyone. You're riding the crest of a wave. You have your team basically telling you you're the best, and you don't think you'll lose. Then you lose, and you're like, shit, how do I come back from this? Whereas he was like, all right, I'm going to come back. And then they obviously had a second knock, and knock it was. I mean, he put a lot more beef for that as well. And whew, daddy, that was a that was. I mean, that's the one that we all want to see. There has to be a trilogy. If there's never a trilogy with those two boys, something's gone wrong. But I mean, that was, he hasn't lost to bad people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not.
No, it's not. It's not devaluing them at all. And the funny thing about it is, with MMA, it continually evolves. And even you look at guys, if you look at that kind of, I wouldn't say post McGregor era, but if you look at the guys after, look at the fighter Poirier has become. Look at the fighter Khabib was. Look at the fighter Nate Diaz is. You know what I mean? Even raising his came to that, but that one where he found it hard to break down Nate mentally, didn't he? And I remember the press conference, and they were firing the cans of Monster at each other and all. And I think there was people at the event.
He was in the wife beater and the paddy hat and everything on the press conference.
And he had the braces. Yeah, he was like Colin Farrell or something like that, wasn't it? It was quality, But I remember at the press conference, he turned around to Nate and he says, "What did he say?" He says, "You're throwing up gang signs with one hand, and in the other hand, you're making animals out of balloons or something like that, wasn't it?" And it was just. And you were just saying, "Go, Jesus Christ, that's deep now. That is deep,
Oh, it was that was proper, and I think Nate appreciated it as well. But it was like going into, rather than going through all the fights as such, and even kind of losing to Khabib. Listen, nobody's beat Khabib, so that's neither here nor there. I mean, he went in deep on Khabib. Some of it we can't even repeat. Towels on heads and all this kind of stuff.
This is where, like, he went to war with Khabib's country, didn't he? It wasn't just Khabib.
Lord. He absolutely did. Right. But then he's showing up at the World Cup hanging out with Vladimir Putin, going, Putin's a fan.
You see him in the suit getting the picture with Putin and all, you know what I mean? It was just
he's a different level of businessman, I think, when it comes to the sports world. And I mean, I suppose as we kind of wrap up, when we talk about his legacy, obviously he's lost twice to Poirier now, but this is the level of the man. Like, anybody else looking down at their ankle snapped in half will be crying, going, bollocks. This lad is shouting out that he's going to get him in the car park.
Yeah.
Going, I'll get you in a fucking car park. And then you hear him going, It was like, and you're going, holy shit. But the truth of the matter is, like, when, he always has the proof to back it up. It's the same with, what was the boxer that he was sparring with, and he smacked him around and he couldn't, he just couldn't get over it.
Oh, yeah. What was his name again?
McInerney, was it?
So I can't remember his name now, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he smacked him around, then he went off home crying. Yeah,
Smacked him around. I mean, he was putting up videos of it and all,
yeah.
and he's like, then he goes and he literally changes the game by, having the first proper super fight in MMA with him and Floyd. Loses that again. No shame in losing to Floyd.
Yeah.
Shows that he's a great boxer and has a career in boxing if he wants. If he ever wants to do any big super fights, which I'm sure he will again, and probably next year, I'd say you'll probably see that happen. There's nothing this lad can't do. He's hinted WWE appearances and stuff with Finn Balor, even Ireland's own. Let's make it happen. Tagging Triple H in it, saying make it happen.
Yeah.
There's literally, this lad has opened so many doors for himself that he can just literally knock. In fact, he doesn't even need to knock. He can just open whatever one, and in he walks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's the definition. He's the definition of the name on the marquee.
Like when it all goes down, is there ever going to be a bigger name in combat sports in terms of a name that attracted more fans? I don't believe so.
Yeah, in such a short period as well.
We're always going to talk about the Muhammad Ali's of the world that paved the way. We'll always talk about the Tysons. We'll talk about the Marvin Haglers, and but I mean, to this level, there's nobody bigger probably in the history than McGregor. So I mean, hats off to the kid. As I said, a lad from Crumlin who was struggling to pay the bills, basically made himself an absolute superstar. Had a game plan to do it. Yeah. And do you know what I mean? Fair play to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible record as well, 22-6. But as you said, the 6 losses that are in there, they're against very high level fighters. You know what I mean? And again, a lot of it is only in the kind of tail end and stuff like that. And he had come through a number of injuries, and as you said, there's talk even he went into that fight, that Poirier fight, and there was a hairline fracture there already.
And apparently that is true, yeah.
And that they kind of knew about, but he still, he was always a guy who showed up. He was always a guy who made weight. He was always a guy who reacted. I remember when the first Jose Aldo fight was called off, and I remember Dana going into the mansion. Remember Aldo got a cracked rib in training or something like that. And he was going, remember they called him out of the bedroom. He was half asleep, and he goes, "I've bad news." And he goes, "I told you he'd cry off, didn't I? I told you he'd cry off, remember?" And he goes, "Yeah, we have." He says, "Well, you better organise something." He says, and he sends Dana off out the door, "Get something organised." And he comes back with Chad Mendes. "Yeah, not a problem. We adjust, And he just so he.
And 2 weeks having to change his whole game plan as well. You know what I mean?
He's a promoter's dream, isn't he? He's a promoter's dream.
Do you know what I mean? Just puts in the work and wants to get it done. I mean, there's no point in asking where he goes next in terms of fights, because he goes wherever he wants to go next. We will see McGregor fights in 2022. It depends on what he deems fit. You know what I mean?
This whole boxing wave now looks appealing, doesn't it? This kind of social media boxing, if you want to call it, you know what I mean?
Well, that's it. And I was talking to someone, I believe it was Rachel, actually. We were talking about how, he was very calm in the midst of Logan Paul calling D, like his missus calling her a 4 out of 10 and all, and telling Conor he can do better, which I thought was a bit disgusting, to be honest with you. Personally, I don't condone, bringing at him like that. And Conor is well within his rights to start, calling shots back.
In fairness, he's dropped a bit of that flavour himself before.
Yeah, the towel over the head thing is kind of, I suppose, one of those where you could deem it disrespectful, to be fair.
Yeah, or Poirier's misses in his DMs.
She did look a bit melty, though, to be fair. She did. And what's she doing in the DMs in the first place, to be fair? So I don't know about that one, but I thought I had a good one. Was like, I'd say McGregor's the type of lad that if he ever runs into Logan Paul, it'll be a knock it down the side of an alley for saying that. No, I'm going to get him proper.
I think he's too clever. He knows there's money in it, so that ain't going to happen like that.
No. But he's got 100%. I mean, this Pacquiao fight has been talked about for quite a while, which is money, and I mean, we'd all love to see that. Do you know what I mean? Pacquiao and him tear it up in the ring. There's lots of people out there. I mean, he's walking around now with 190 pounds for whatever reason. He's just stacking the weight on, and you know, he's obviously got a reason for that. Now, I was reading something that stacking weight on like that when you've had such a horrific injury like that can really actually do a lot for strengthening your bones and getting you back. So, I mean, that does make a lot of sense from that perspective. I'm not an expert in that world, but I've heard that can be done. Like, you know, it's kind of a possible method to recovery. I've heard Bisbin talk about that as well. So, I mean, it's great. I mean, he's calling out even the likes of Chael and Bisbin and all. Like, who knows? He could be getting up to their weight saying, right, lads, do you want to come out for a bang? You know what I mean? And he knows both of those lads wouldn't turn that money down.
No.
Hell no. Although, that would be, I don't know whether you get a 5'9" jacked up lad going in against someone like a Chael Sonnen. It's going to be good news.
No.
But you never know with McGregor. I would never count him out of anything.
Can you imagine the promos with him and Sonnen?
Listen, those two could just say, let's work together. I mean, let's work this. You know what I mean? And I mean, now Poirier losing as well. I mean, that sets up a trilogy right there as well, doesn't it? I mean, that's perfect.
There's lots of opportunities for him there in terms of, I mean, the world's his oyster in terms of what he wants to do.
He could fight a Nunes. You never know with him. He could fight Amanda Nunes and say, come on, let's get it on. Would it surprise you if he starts calling Amanda Nunes out now as well?
The UFC would have to drop an intergender belt or something like that.
I'm telling you.
Imagine.
I know, I'm joking, of course.
Yeah. No, I think he's looking at the landscape of this new wave of boxing that seems to be coming through. It's kind of, sometimes I describe it really as white collar with millions. It's the only way I can describe it. But I mean, those Paul brothers they're decent. There's no doubt about it. I know people took them as a bit of a joke initially, YouTubers and all that kind of thing. Those boys can hit pads, no problem.
Listen, they are absolutely decent. I mean, especially Jake, he can fight. And I mean, we need to stop getting this, we need to start getting this YouTuber out of the sentence. They're not just YouTubers, they can fight. And it's like we've heard Chael say it, they are now fighters. And they are. You know what I mean? They went in, they've fought. Obviously, Logan, I think he's the guy, isn't he? He's the one that was a bit of a dickhead initially when he was taking fucking videos in the suicide forest. I think he's that guy, isn't he? In Japan, yeah. But he kind of redeemed himself a little bit. He seems to be the quieter of the two anyway. Yeah. But he's the one that fought, obviously, Mayweather. Gave a decent showing of himself. But I mean, at the end of the day, look, I mean, it's a 6'3" bleeding collegiate athlete fighting 5'7" Mayweather, and he still lost, you know what I mean? So it's like, come on. Give me a bit of a break here. Woodley obviously was a big step up for Jake Paul. So, but you know, I wouldn't put McGregor in this. I mean, McGregor trained and boxed in the Crumlin Boxing Club, which is a very, very well-respected boxing club in Ireland. He can box. He went in there with Mayweather, and in the early rounds gave him something to think about. You know, So I think Mayweather could be a proper pro boxer, no pun intended, proper pro boxer, if he wanted to be, without a shadow of a doubt.
McGregor, you mean?
McGregor, sorry. Yeah. Who did I say?
Mayweather. I was thinking he is a proper pro boxer.
Me, yeah, the best of all time. Sorry, I'm glad you got me on that. I didn't need fans giving me a shit for that one. Yeah, one of my favorite fighters of all time. Sorry, Floyd. I'm excited here. You got me all jacked up thinking about how fucking, you know, how like, yeah. I mean, I think that's a world. I think you could have two MMA fights and one big blockbuster, you know, boxing match as well. And the thing about it, he's not afraid of anyone. Like, he would fight Tyson Fury if the money was right. You know, he's afraid of absolutely nobody.
Yes,
for all we know, that's why he's putting the weight on.
Remember that time he was in the gym with him on the mountain?
Unbelievable. Like, he's literally afraid of absolutely nobody. And he'd have won if he'd have clocked him one. He'd have won. Yeah. You know, it's just, yeah, look, I mean, I think it is someone that, you know, Ireland can call one of their own and been proud of. I know whatever, all these controversies I stay away from. I look at the athlete and the man behind it. You know, there's always going to be controversies that come with that. And not all of them are always true. Let's be fair. So I think we should tip our hats to, you know, this Irish son straight out of Crumlin now. And the Black Forge, we'll give them a cheap little plug and hopefully we'll get a fucking steak dinner out of them. Probably not, but we might get a free shot out of them.
when you look at what he's done to that place, there's no cheap plugs there at all.
Absolutely not.
The money that man has spent. Yeah,
it's amazing. So yeah, I think, you know, I think it's fantastic what he's done, and I certainly look forward to 2022 to see what's next in his career, because it ain't over.
Pacquiao hopefully and Croker full.
Oof. We're there. We're definitely there. There is no doubt that we're not there for that.
Tyson Fury on the undercard.
I think when it comes to this man, he would be, to be honest. This is the levels we're talking about. You know what I mean? There's no bigger draw. Like I said, there's no bigger draw in sports than. I mean, when you get Ric Flair coming out and tweeting you when he upset the whole wrestling world, when he was literally just stirring the pot, saying all these lads are fakes, they're all little phonies. It was like The Rock and Triple H and all, they're the real deal. You know, they're all bosses. Yeah. You're like, lads, he's kayfabing these L fellas that literally lived on kayfabe.
and our friend Tyson Fury, I mean, he's come into the promo world big time as well, hasn't he?
Listen.
So he's been watching as well.
Oh, he's been watching. But this is what I mean. Like, without McGregor, Tyson Fury's not at this level either. By looking at that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's been so influential across a number of landscapes, really, when you think about it.
Unbelievable. Like, when you look at some of the great lads, shout out to Paddy Houlihan, who will be on the show as well at some stage soon. Like, you look at all these lads, and he's opened the door for some of these lads, his own friends, as you said, to kind of make a living and give them a little bit of a platform to, you know, to do what they want to do. I think it's fantastic. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So, Niall, thanks for coming on today. It's been a nice chat about something different than pro wrestling and football for both of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, a break from football.
A break from football for you especially. Unfortunately, pro wrestling's just in my head 24/7. I can't get away from that. So, yeah, it's been fantastic. Please, everybody, once again, do follow the Dynamo Podcast Network. We are available across all platforms. This is available on audio if you prefer to listen to the audio versions. And all of our shows are available on audio. And yeah, so keep supporting us. And I suppose we're getting closer to Christmas now. So I hope everyone's in the Christmas spirit, getting ready. Hope they got that bird ready in the freezer. And hope you all have a great one. But this isn't the last we've seen from myself or Niall. But until then, Dynamo, Niall, we're over and out.
My pleasure.